Hello, my name is Joan Walton. I'm a researcher at York St John University in the UK and a member of the Galileo Commission Steering Group, part of the Scientific and Medical Network. The title of this conference is Neuroscience Needs a Revolution to Understand Consciousness. My claim in this presentation is that if there is to be a revolution in neuroscience, there needs first to be a revolution in education. This is because neuroscientists and those who fund them have been brought up in the same positivist Newtonian paradigm that has dominated the Western world for nearly 4 centuries. Our earliest years are the most influential in terms of worldview transmission. By the time we reach adulthood, we've been socialized into a particular way of understanding the world that has been given to us by our families and local communities. As with all of us, neuroscientists have been taught the norms, beliefs and values of the families and educational institutions in which they have been raised, and will have absorbed the same materialist assumptions of reality as all members of Western society. These assumptions include the notion that the brain creates consciousness, and that when the brain dies, so does consciousness. Most neuroscientists will observe the workings of the brain, quite naturally taking for granted that it is the generator of consciousness, as that idea has been so deeply embedded into their own brains from childhood. So, for there to be a revolution in neuroscience to understand consciousness, there needs first to be a transformation in the worldview of neuroscientists, which includes a willingness to be open about the origins and nature of consciousness. This kind of transformation is an educational challenge. What methods of learning might enable neuroscientists and others influential in shaping ideas about consciousness to reconsider the assumptions with which they were brought up? How might they be encouraged to think in a very different way? They won't experience this in traditional educational establishments, which are located in and reflect the mainstream cultural and political contexts that are responsible for sustaining the dominant reductionist Newtonian worldview. This leads me logically to my earlier assertion that if there is to be a revolution in neuroscience, there needs firstly to be a revolution in education. In a short paper such as this, it is not possible to consider the big picture of what that revolution in education might involve if ideas about consciousness are to be transformed. But to be truly transformational, an essential element would be that it is informed by an ontological view of the world which challenges the reductionist materialist paradigm. This would allow for the probability that, rather than consciousness being a byproduct of the brain, it may in fact be fundamental or even universal. As many Eastern philosophies, mystical traditions, and indigenous knowledges have long maintained, the possibility exists that, at a deep level, we are all one. Such a view is supported by quantum non-locality and entanglement in physics, symbiosis and synergy in biology, and the collective unconscious in psychology. John Wheeler, theoretical physicist, stated, "Useful as it is under everyday circumstances to say that the world exists out there, independent of us, that view can no longer be upheld. There is a strange sense in which this is a participatory universe." Wheeler suggests that, rather than being passive bystanders in the world, we are instead active participants who create, rather than discover, the universe in which we are interacting. However, much of the evidence that is currently undertaken to prove that consciousness does not reside totally in the brain uses the same experimental methods that belong to a positivist research paradigm. Of course, there's an important place for large-scale quantitative studies. There is, though, a limit to what can be achieved using this approach. If we are hoping to replace a separate ontology with a participatory one, then using a methodology based on the separability of the researcher and researched, and relying on positivist concepts such as replicability and statistical significance, presents something of a contradiction. Furthermore, evidence based on such methodologies does not appear to be very successful in shifting deeply embedded belief systems. Vast amounts of research supporting the existence of consciousness beyond the brain have not succeeded in displacing the prevailing materialist paradigm. Three neuroscientists, Schwartz, Stapp, and Beauregard, have written, "Theoretical restriction is motivated primarily by ideas about the natural world that have been known to be fundamentally incorrect for more than three-quarters of a century." In a comprehensive paper, Schwartz, Stapp, and Beauregard demonstrate how nearly all attempts to understand brain functioning have been based on principles of classical physics that were falsified in the early part of the 20th century. This shows how intransigent to change are beliefs gained early in life. It seems then that we need approaches to research and education that reflect a creative, participatory ontology, not a deterministic, separatist one. Approaches that foster the questioning of unconsciously held beliefs. This then raises the question: what methods exist or can be created which reflect a participatory ontology and enable people to experience a sense of connection with, rather than separation from, the wider universe? My intention here is to consider just one method that has the potential to change our ways of seeing the world, that of Bohm dialogue. Using a participatory ontological view of the world that he gained through working in quantum physics, and with an awareness of the Greek origins of the word dialogue, with dia meaning through and logos meaning word, Bohm devised dialogue as a means of collective participation, which allows for the harmony of the individual and the collective, in which the whole constantly moves towards coherence. He developed the idea that space and time might be derived from deeper levels of reality. Within this implicate order, everything is interconnected, in which each individual element has access to information about all other elements. The central theme of his theory is the unbroken wholeness of the totality of existence as an undivided flowing movement without borders. Bohm dialogue encourages participants to become aware of and suspend deeply held assumptions, theories, and certainties in order to be able to go deeper into any area being spoken about. It encourages deep listening and a realization that at least as much goes on in silence as in verbal communication. Silence provides time for individuals to reflect on what has been said and respond to that, rather than be pressured to move on to the next stage in the promotion of already established points of view. In 1996, Bohm explained his approach in the book On Dialogue. In 1999, William Isaacs developed these ideas further in Dialogue and the Art of Thinking Together. These two books explain clearly and in detail the theory informing Bohm's approach to dialogue, including how it creates a method for evolving new forms of knowledge and wisdom, and opens up an effective way for, as Bohm claims, humanity to discover meaning and to achieve harmony. Isaacs identifies four key dialogical skills. The first is listening. It is maintained that the effectiveness of dialogue depends on the quality of the listening that takes place. There needs to be a commitment to subdue one's own thoughts, theories, and feelings, and listen at a deep level to what others are saying. There is also the aim of listening to the whole. The practice of collective listening to that which lies beyond individual contribution makes it possible to access new levels of insight. The second skill is respecting. This is the need to value the right of another person to have their point of view and to take it into consideration, even if it does not relate to one's own way of seeing things. Differences in views will be inevitable, but the process of challenging a point of view and giving an alternative should be done without diminishing or critiquing the other person for holding that view. Thirdly, and critically important in the light of the realization that beliefs given to us from our earliest days are likely to be unconsciously taken for granted, is suspending. This is about being prepared to become aware of and suspend deeply held assumptions, theories, and certainties in order to be able to go deeper into any area being spoken about. This is essential if the wisdom in and beyond any group of people gathered together is to be accessed. If we can suspend our views and truly listen to and reflect on what others are saying, then a deeper order can become visible that allows us to think in new and different ways. It creates space for the previously unseen. Finally, voicing is the ability to speak in response to what is engaging the individual in the present moment. This involves that individual as a whole person who does not feel that they have to censor their own truth. Rather than repeat well-versed arguments and theories, there is a need to tune in to what is going on in the groups through the silences as well as the contributions, and to be able to express what is going on deeply within them, whatever that may be. We learn to improvise and by this means create something new in the group, thus experiencing the freedom of open communication in creative dialogue. When people gather together to engage in lively debates on subjects of shared interest, there can be a tendency to interrupt each other or to be so focused on one's own point of view that what other people say is not properly heard. It is also common for a few people to dominate the discussion and for others to say little. So, although there are no rules as such in Bohm dialogue, the process can be helped by the group agreeing in advance to a number of core principles to guide behaviour. The purpose of these is to enable the ethos of reflective dialogue to become embedded in the communicating, with everyone being given responsibility for ensuring they are adhered to. The key principles include demonstrating respect and non-judgmentality at all times, one person to speak at a time, avoiding side conversations. No one person should speak for very long at a time. A normal limit of 2 minutes is assumed. Soapbox presentations to be avoided. In recognition of the silence being as important as the verbal contributions, it is desirable to have a silence between each contribution, perhaps a minimum of 20 seconds. This provides the opportunity for true listening and reflection to take place. In summary, dialogue as a method supports a more open culture in which thoughts and experiences can be shared with mutual respect. When groups of people learn to think together, there is the generation of ideas and ways of perceiving reality that no one person would have created on their own. Dialogue, based on these principles, is an educative process in itself and allows for knowledge and wisdom to emerge that did not reside in any one individual at the outset. My claim in this presentation has been that if we are to achieve a revolution in neuroscience in order to understand consciousness, there first needs to be a revolution in education. Reliance on the transmission of information, however well evidenced, is not achieving the shift in awareness that is required if we are to replace the mainstream reductionist Newtonian paradigm with a more participatory, holistic worldview. In introducing David Bohm's idea of dialogue and the principles underpinning it, I've been proposing one specific example of what might be involved in the evolution of consciousness education. Perhaps as we move forward and put time and energy into creating additional and imaginative forms of consciousness education, we may make a crucial contribution to the overall enterprise of achieving a revolution in how we understand what it means to be human, including a revolution in neuroscience. Thank you for listening.